Hi everyone, I want to share some really interesting findings I had earlier about the Sly Steps aspect. This is a new aspect introduced in Season 5. I've tried it out just now on the PTR, and I gotta say this thing is really cracked. It may not look like it at first, but when you think about what is happening here, you will probably understand why. So what it says is that when you lose a certain amount of life, you will automatically trigger a defensive, subterfuge, or macabre skill, depending on the class, before receiving damage. This has a 30 seconds cooldown and cannot cast mobility skills. Now, defensive skills are really strong for some classes, in particular the Sorcerer, so this is where I tried this out. And my expectation was that, yeah, this would probably not really work too well with, you get like a big hit, you die one shot, or you have a barrier up and it just kind of, accumulates the damage taken through the barrier and then eventually procs something or something like that. But it turns out that all of my expectations were blown away, and this works in the most optimistic way possible. In fact, you can avoid one-shots from this. Yes, you can have a CHP character, basically a full glass cannon, and you can live through any attack in the game with this effect, as long as you trigger, for example, Flame Shield. Or the same story for Necromancers with their Blood Mist. Well, I hope you're enjoying this video so far, but before we continue, I want to give a shout out to Opera GX, the sponsor of today's video. If you don't know Opera GX, this is the browser for gamers. You are probably one of them since you're watching this video, so I want to show you some of the perks that this browser offers over others. Personally, I've been using Opera GX on and off for quite a while now. One thing I really like about it is that it has incredible customization. There are built-in themes, mods, sounds, wallpapers, and even background music that you can switch on and off and combine as you like with the mods function. It also has all of your most important socials and messenger functions in one spot, so you never miss anything. Another feature I really enjoy is the GX Corner, which has lots of gaming related news, articles, reviews, and even free games that you can go and try out directly from the browser. Especially the release schedule is something that I keep an eye on. And another perk of the Opera GX browser is that it's very light on your system if you want it to be. It has a GX cleaner that can clean up cookies and cache for you with the click of a button. And you have the GX control feature that allows you to limit how much RAM and CPU your browser is allowed to use, so you can throttle its impact on your system, for example, while gaming. And there are many other nice features to discover in the Opera GX browser. For example, Aria, their built-in AI that helps you out whenever you have a question. All in all, I really had good experiences whenever I used the Opera GX browser, and I really recommend you guys to try it out for yourself. It's for free, you can find the link down in the description, so go check it out, and let's go back to the video. And I can show this in action right now. So we have this here. This is where I tried this. I went into a pit 200 basically, and I just had this item equipped and a weapon so that I could actually use any skill. You need a weapon equipped. So I had like almost no HP and I had no armor, no resistances basically. And you can see here that, well, I walked in and there is like a teleporter elite that teleports on me here. This teleporter elite here. And he instantly triggers the flame shield. So I had this here on my left click, but I was moving a force move, so I didn't accidentally press it or something. This is the teleporter hitting me, one-shotting me, and I live through this effect. So this is really big, I've got to say, because in particular for sorcerers, we thought that they would really suffer from this patch and lose out on a lot of their survivability and so on. But it turns out that this aspect just will keep sorcerers alive forever, basically. This is really insane, because not only does it cast the skill for free, but for example, if you have only flame shield in your bar, it will also do that once every 30 seconds. So in case you ever get one shot, in case something ever goes wrong, your barrier falls off, you get a big hit, whatever, you will live and it will automatically trigger the flame shield. Either you have your flame shield already running, then of course you don't take damage, or well, the effect is ready. You have a 30 seconds cooldown. It will trigger the flame shield even through the cooldown. So it's pretty insane. You can have 2 flame shields in a row, for example. You can stand there, cast your flame shield, and then you can get one shot and you cast another flame shield from this effect, for example. Now, there is a bit of a downside here, which is that there is actually no tracker for this. You don't actually see like how much life is left to accumulate. You also don't see any timer when it has triggered. So there's no cooldown, nothing that you can really identify. So you kind of have to get a gut feeling for this, I guess, and be aware that this has happened. But I see it here again, like you walk in, you get one shot and it still protects you from Flame Shield. And the reason why I think this aspect is so good is because, especially for sorcerers, where we thought they lost a lot of their survivability thanks to the ice armor nerfs, for example, in general, sorcerers rely on their barriers, and whenever something goes through your barrier, you can kind of expect to die right after that. And this is no longer the case. You can protect yourself with barriers the entire time, and you don't really have to worry about being like a very glass cannon character, because whenever something goes wrong, you will have this effect, and it will trigger your Flame Shield. Now, of course, this means that you have to have only Flame Shield on the bar. If you have, for example, Ice Armor and Flame Shield, it will choose one of them at random. However, even an Ice Armor most of the time will probably just save you. Maybe not for hardcore. On hardcore, you would probably consider just running Flame Shield and this thing, and you effectively have a cheat death effect. Like, you cannot die if you have this on hardcore. At least you cannot die if you don't get killed twice in 30 seconds. So this is essentially the old cheat death mechanic on crack, as long as you make sure that you don't accidentally lose life in between from like little chip damage and you have your barriers up all the time. Now, on other classes, this is not so easily usable, I gotta say, because yeah, most of them don't really have immunity skills. There are rogues that have Subterfuge here, and Subterfuge includes the Dark Shroud. So in that case, you could actually also trigger an immunity skill with the new Shroud of Kandura's unique that has been introduced, that allows you to get a 3 seconds immunity when you activate Dark Shroud. So that should also work together. I actually didn't try it, but I don't see why not, because the behavior is exactly the same as Flame Shield, so that should just give you the immunity. And for example, you have Blood Mist on a Necromancer. But the thing is, also on a Necromancer and also on the Rogues, it's not that easy to build really permanent barriers similar to the Sorcs, and you will constantly kind of lose a little bit of life. I guess there are ways to do that. For example, Rogues have gotten some new passives, the Second Wind, for example, to actually accumulate barriers. You could do stuff like Temerity. And the Necromancers also have, for example, the Shielding Storm. So a few ways exist to make use of this, potentially on any class, to be honest. Even on the Barbs, if you have, for example, just Challenging Shout in bar, and you trigger a Challenging Shout, and that Challenging Shout triggers before receiving damage. So when you get a big hit that would one-shot you, will trigger this thing first, and you have the Challenging Shout up, you have the extra HP, you have the extra damage reduction, and I mean, I've never seen a Barb with Challenging Shout die. So they're effectively invincible at that point as well. And yeah, maybe you can also do some other stuff on, for example, Druid with the Debilitating Roar, or a Bulwark. Even a Bulwark can potentially save you. It gives you the Unstoppable, it gives you a big barrier as well. So it's not exactly the same as like a Flame Shield, but it gets close enough in most scenarios, I think. It will depend a little bit on like how consistent you want to make that one-shot protection for you. I guess Sorcs do have the best synergy with this because of the natural barriers they have, and because they have Flame Shield here, and I guess you could try to get away without Ice Armor in some setups. This will potentially even free up a slot on your build. Maybe you can fill it with something else that is not a defensive skill. Maybe you can throw in another Conjuration, or maybe you can even throw in a basic here to give you like a little bit of a buff here from, for example, the crit from Spark or something like that. Depends a little bit on the setup that you're running, but I think there's definitely a lot of potential for this aspect. And even if you have two different defensive skills, like an Ice Armor and a Flame Shield, I would definitely consider running this on a Sorc, basically on every single build. For the Barbs, here's a Ground Stomp, Rallying Cry, Iron Skin, and Challenging Shout. I would also say Iron Skin is a really powerful defensive tool here. However, that depends a bit on the situation, because if you are full HP and you get one shot, technically Iron Skin cannot even activate. So I wonder actually what happens when that is the case. If that would just do nothing and just die anyway. But if you don't die one shot, then Iron Skin would trigger when you have like maybe half HP or something. And well, Iron Skin, you will always live basically. So that's also pretty powerful. But otherwise there's Challenging Shout here. Even Rallying Cry, you can get the Unstoppable potentially. You might be CC'd while this happens. And the good thing about this is it doesn't even have to be one single hit. It just accumulates the amount of life loss. So if you get CC'd in a pack and slowly get clobbered to death basically when the mobs strike back, well, then you can get out of that with the Rallying Cry as well. So there are a few ways out here for the Barbs. Druids also, I guess, Cycling Armor goes into quite a few builds in the future, and that is probably something you don't really want to cast like ever. But there's Bulwark, there's Debilitating Roar, that's pretty good. There's also Bloodhound. It would be kind of interesting to see if Debilitating Roar would actually affect the damage done by the enemy that is trying to trigger this, basically. I guess not. I guess that Debilitating Roar will probably still trigger after and not actually really protect you here. But yeah, there might be some interactions there. And then we have Rogue here, as I described, mostly Dark Shroud if you combine this with the Shroud of Kandura's. So this is really the only interaction I see, because otherwise there's nothing else that really saves you here. Yeah, I can get a concealment, it gives you unstoppable, so I guess same story as the barb. I guess a smoke grenade won't really save you, and neither does a poison trap. And even activating a fresh dark shroud if you have it on a bar, if you don't have the unique chest, won't really do much. Like, you probably don't do that. Like, there's no rogue build that really does that anyway, so you wouldn't really put that on the bar. And lastly, we have the necromancers here. So I talked about blood mist. This is a macabre skill, and we also have, funny enough, bone prison. That won't save you, unfortunately. Also, we have bone spirit, and that is kind of interesting, because technically you can just run around and trigger 3 bone spirits with this stuff. So I wonder if this actually like drains all of your essence and then does like the full damage and so on. That could be kind of funny, I guess. Realistically, probably not really something you want to rely on, especially on a 30 seconds cooldown, but the idea behind it is kind of hilarious, I gotta say. But yeah, if you don't play a bone spirit build, or like, you know, with bone prison necessarily, and not many builds really do that, I guess, then you can just have blood mist on your bar, and you can have this as the only skill that can trigger. So you can also, just like the Sorcs, basically never die, but you have to make sure that as a necro you have to build up barrier as well, probably through shielding storm aspect. So for now, this is what I found here about the slice steps aspect. I think this is a really powerful new defensive tool, especially for the Sorcs, but every class can potentially make use of this, and I will definitely be experimenting with this more in the future to see what else we can find here. But I think that this is a huge tool, a huge, like, maybe like overlooked a little bit mechanic here that might really help out the Sorcs in the future, because Sorcs are generally considered some of the squishiest classes, and some like somewhat harder to play, I guess, than others, thanks to the barrier cycling that you have to do constantly. And it's also kind of like top end heavy with the cooldown investment, for example. Like, the entire Sorc class kind of like relies on these barriers, but it's also kind of hard to even get to the point where you can reliably use them all the time. And you have to have a lot of skills in your setup that actually have cooldowns, and then reset the cooldowns of ice blades, for example, and so on. So it's not really so easy to make sure that you always have the barriers and don't accidentally lose life. But if you play like a proper endgame Sorc setup, then this will be the case, and then Slice Steps comes in clutch. As a hardcore enjoyer, I gotta say, yeah, I'm not really that happy about this whole thing, because, well, I've played a lot of Sorc on hardcore, and generally I've felt okay there, but I definitely also feel a little bit more scared than on other classes and most of the time, so maybe it's okay to have an effect like this. I would just, you know, maybe caution Blizzard a little bit to be careful with such effects, because something like this can be game breaking really fast. And in particular for hardcore, we don't really want to go back to having cheat deaths, you know, everywhere basically. So this is just what I want to share here for my personal opinion. But again, everyone has their own, so also let me know what you think about this, and especially if you're a hardcore player, what are your thoughts on this aspect? But yeah, for now, I just want to share this. I think this is a really nice, powerful aspect that a lot of builds should be running in the future. I will certainly be running this on many builds, and let's see. I hope you enjoyed my summary here, and I'll see you guys next time.